Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're taking a look at the 6-inch random orbital polisher from Kobalt. This is part of their 24-volt max brushless lineup and was relatively recently released as a tool-only product in very late 2020, early 2021. So we look at the box, you can see the product there, and if we look at the top, we can look at the product grid and we can see a number of tools here. Not a lot of surprises as of February 2021 for what's shown on the grid here. One notable item that is not on the grid that we know that is out is the 24-volt max ×2 mower is missing from this assortment grid, but it does show the sprayer and the pole saw. But no other surprises here that gives us a hint about the road of other future tools that may be confirmed indirectly by that grid. So turning this around, looking at the back of the box, and we look at the specs, we can see that it has a 5-speed setting, and the battery goes sideways, which reminds me a lot of what I've seen of the Flex polishers, which is a high-end brand that is made by the same company that makes the Kobalt tools, known as Shervon. And so it has the adjustable sensor, and it's got a couple different handles, but there's no battery in the box here, so let's take a look and see what you get with this tool. So right out the gate, we've got a couple different pads here. We've got a blue, a black, and a yellow polishing pad. We'll set those aside. We have our manual. And then underneath the cardboard here is the tool. We'll set that aside for a moment. And we've got our handle selection here, a D handle and a side handle, kind of like an angle grinder. We also have a couple of bolts and screws and a hex wrench. And that is it for the box. So now if we look at the tool itself, take it out of the bag. It's got the nice overmold grip on it that you would expect. And you can see there's a slot on the left side and the right side where you can attach the handles, as well as there is an octagonal indexing there for the D handle. And then we have our trigger, which is kind of interesting. That's got this like squareness to it. It's not nearly as tapered as the other Kobalt products. And the grip on the side here is also a little bit different in terms of the way that they've got their grip set up here, but there is a lock-on switch there and a nice overmold here to be able to apply pressure with your palm downward. And this already comes with a Velcro hook and loop style attachment pad on it. So then we can go ahead and take one of these pads and then just press it right on, and we should be good to go. Obviously, you want to do a little better job centering than what I did there. So one of the things I think is interesting is how the battery on this goes on sideways rather than the other direction. But as I leave it sitting here, at least with the pad on and no battery, it's able to balance. So let's take a look at the rest of the hardware that we get with this. So we've got an angle grinder style grip. There's no spot to put a wrench in the side of this. And we also have the compact D handle style grip. I think this is what I'll probably end up using. And then we've got a hex wrench and a couple of bolts here that we can use to be able to attach our D handle. And then our our wrench that's in there. If I take this pad off here, and then this wrench in here can go into the back side here. Might have to get it just right to get it, there we go, to get it to line up to, if you need to be able to replace. There we go. And then once you get that wrench in there, and with that wrench in, you can just spin this pad off like this, and then you can replace this with another backing. And then you can see here the random orbital head and how that works here at the multi-position. Nice to see this sealed up here just a little bit better, just so the polish doesn't accumulate in and under here. It's not hard to imagine that there'd be some degree, an element of cleaning that you need under here. And you can almost see the guts of it looking a lot like an angle grinder combined with a random orbital sander. And if you really wanted to, you could take 6-inch sandpaper, and I think you could turn this into a 6-inch orbital sander as well. And before I go to reseat this, I'm going to put the wrench back in like that. You can see where the wrench only goes basically one way in relative to the counterbalance for the random orbital action there. And now that we got that tightened up there, we can put our handle in here. Now this can go either to the right side or to the left side. That's going to be up to your preference or however you want it. I'm going to put mine off to the left. And then with that octagonal side there, this can index up, forward, not quite all the way forward, or it can go back. I think I'll put mine somewhere about like that. Put the hex bolts in. All right, there we go. Obviously, there's going to be a fair bit of personal preference for how much you like the side handle versus the over-the-top handle, or no handle at all. Entirely personal preference. And then we've got our speed selector here right on top, easily able to be accessed by your thumb as it's on the tool. My suspicion is that probably settings 1, 2, and possibly 3 are probably going to be a little bit underpowered is my guess. And that most of the time it'll live probably somewhere between 4 and 5, give or take. So then now let's put a battery on it. So in general, because this reminds me a lot of the angle grinder, one of the concerns that I've got is if there's any issue with this polisher being compatible with the ultimate output battery. Now, one would think that this should be no problem at all, but some of the angle grinders have had issues with it. And since this is sold as a bare tool, you'd be adding this on to other batteries you've got. So I'm going to go ahead and slap in an ultimate output battery to the end, and let's see if there are any issues with this, and we can hear how the tool sounds. No issue at all. And then with that lock here, I can press this in. And so I can use that to lock the tool on, so I don't have to keep my thumb or my finger constantly holding that button down. Like I said earlier, it'd be nice if this was not so rectangular here and is a little more tapered and rounded like a drill trigger, but that's how they designed it here. I think I can at least tolerate it. That may be a personal preference for some, that people may not like that specific style trigger, but it's at least acceptable to me and I think will work. One detail that's going to be important is there's an intake screen right down here, which is how the motor is going to breathe. Just like the angle grinder and I think a couple of the other, and the small circular saw has a similar fine mesh at the bottom. You want to make sure it's clean, but in this case here, because of dealing with polish and any other cleaning chemicals, just make sure that area is clean and able to breathe, so that whenever the fan that cools the motor is able to bring in air, that it's not obstructed and causing your tool to overheat. In the event this guard here does get dirty, you should be able to take a small screwdriver and then be able to pop this out. This is intended to be a serviceable item. However, they do not sell replacements. So obviously your mileage may vary on this, but here I'm just using the small screwdriver. And then I can just pop the screen out like this. So, and then now with this out, I could run this under a faucet and completely get it cleaned out of this, we'll call it a micro mesh, and then replace it back onto the tool. You're not going to want to run water into it. As you can see, down there are the wires for the battery attachment at the bottom. But this does pop out very easily, so you can go ahead and clean it. And then there is a nice little cutout here underneath it that will show you exactly where it goes. And then we can just snap that back down like that, hopefully. And that is good right there. One other interesting tidbit here on the battery pack, or the bottom of the battery, that I thought was interesting, is in this design from Kobalt, they have these 4 little white bumpers here to help to reduce battery vibration and to help hold the battery on a little better, which I think is a little nice. They sit just proud of the bottom here to be able to offer just a little bit of vibration protection to the cells in the battery, because vibration is something that will definitely shorten the battery's life as it goes on, but it does make the battery just a little bit stiffer to click into place. Here's a 2 amp hour battery, and even with a 2 amp hour battery, it's definitely a little stiffer, but that's actually good. I like the vibration dampening on the battery. That should make it easier to hold, easier to operate, and extend the battery life. So tip of the hat to them for doing that. But it's not hard to imagine that over time, these little white little bumpers could work their way out. So just be mindful of it. It's not that big of a deal, the end of the world if it happens, but something here just to be mindful about tool wear and tool use, and a new small feature at least from Kobalt. One other thing that I think is interesting about this tool is on the wrench for removing the pad, or the hook and loop backing pad, that I think is interesting that I wish they would have done is I wish they would have stamped into the stamped wrench the size of it, presumably in millimeters, and said something like Kobalt polisher, so that if I put it in my wrench drawer, I know exactly what it's for. It would have been nice if they would have done that, or even better yet, had they just simply put a spindle lock button somewhere on the head of the tool, somewhere to be able to lock that down, to be able to change it out just by pressing that down and then holding and twisting off the pad, I think would have been preferable rather than having this stamped wrench. In the event you decide you don't want to keep the black stamped wrench that came around, you can also substitute a regular 14mm wrench, and you can still fit it in here and be able to get a grip on the bolt to be able to remove the pad. But just remember, there's going to be, just based on that offset counterbalance, there's only going to be a couple positions you can get that wrench into. And just like that, that comes off with a regular wrench, a regular 14mm wrench. This is a USA Craftsman raised panel wrench. I suspect many others will do the same thing. I don't know about some of the larger crescent wrenches, but certainly a 14mm wrench is all you need to do that. So if you'd like, and you don't want to keep this around in your wrench drawer, feel free to toss it as long as you've got a 14mm around. And so now I would show you this in action on a car, but it's about -14 wind chill outside right now. So I'm going to use a slightly different alternative to show you this tool in action that we'll jump to after this cut. Now to test out our Kobalt 24-volt polisher, while it is about -15 degrees Fahrenheit outside as I'm filming this video. So instead of detailing my car, I will be using this to help clean up a washing machine outer basin. This is a Maytag Bravos XL, just for fun here. And so we'll be using this to clean up and get rid of the residual soap scum around the outside. So just to show the versatility of a tool like this, stretches far beyond just basic automotive detailing, because you can buy replacement pads. You can think about all sorts of other places you could use this around your home. Perhaps you use it to help clean up a bathtub or a shower. That's also really nasty. Using a similar approach, maybe a little different for the specific situation, but a similar approach, which is where I think a tool like this offers a variety of other unique possibilities beyond just the obvious auto detailing. And so now what I've got here is I've got my firmer pad on here, the yellow pad here, because I've got a little bit more abrasive scrubbing I need to do here. Obviously, if you're detailing your car, you need to be careful with the right kind of compound you're putting on there, so you got the right form of lubrication between the pad and the surface. I'm not terribly worried about that here today, because my main goal is to get rid of the residual soap scum from the outside of the barrel. So then for this here, just because I'm going to be working in some awkward situations, I'm using the smaller 2 amp hour battery for this rather than the larger 4 amp hour battery that the manual recommends as being enough to get around a car. I'm not working on a car here. For me right now, compactness counts, and I'm using the bail handle here where I can pull this back so I can reach down deeper to get the pad where I want it to go. And now to get started, I'm going to use a little bit of this Meguiar's Plastex here. I'm going to put a little bit here on the pad. Hopefully that's enough to get started. I might have used a little bit too much. And now, on to the fun. Also, in this case here, I'm also wearing gloves and safety glasses to protect my face with the chemicals here in use. Make sure you do likewise to keep yourself safe. right, now here's the after. Me polishing it up around and using the polisher on the washing machine. And I got most of the soap rings out as best as I could. There's a few places that I just had to be careful how hard I was willing to push on it. But definitely looks a lot better when you look at it. So now, after having used this tool for a little bit here, just very briefly because of how cold it is outside, a couple thoughts on this. First of all, I wasn't sure how well I would like the square trigger, but I've got to tell you, I actually really liked how I could get a couple fingers behind this pretty surely without activating it, to leave one finger to hold it, to be able to trigger, or to put two fingers on it like this. This is how I felt. It was actually pretty well balanced, and I was actually pleasantly surprised at how well I liked it, that I might even like that on an angle grinder. Maybe I'm a little weird, but that square trigger might just grow on me. I'm a little surprised by that. Secondly, this bail handle here, even when you tighten down the screws, does have some adjustability to it. And then with a 2 amp hour battery, if I fold it all the way back, and I hold it here with one finger, it actually has reasonably good balance like that, which I thought was nice. You know, and I also thought it was nice how I could fold it forward to try to get my hand in whatever position I wanted to be able to hold it, to try to get the right angle, to try to get it to go. You know, I also think that the soft rubber on the end here is actually nice in the event that you try to get a little too close to the front. This does stick out just a little bit. In my opinion, it'd be nice if this stuck out just a touch farther out the front, where this head was just a touch further forward. But I think that's at least a pass on that. With the 2 amp hour battery, see if I can do this right, it does stand up on the end, so that's nice as far as trying to figure out how to go. But with this bail handle on it, it'll lay down very nicely on that handle without rolling around with the battery in that position. So no complaints about that in terms of figuring out how do you put it down, because you don't obviously want to put it down with the pad onto a dirty surface. Now, as far as power, that's where I'm a little more dubious. That sitting around 4 and 5, I thought it ran out of power a little bit. A couple times where I wanted a little more power out of it. Now, granted, I didn't crank it all the way up as far as it could go, all the way up to 5. I was sitting around between 4 and 5, like right in here, which I thought should be powerful enough. But at the same point, I also understand when you're polishing a car, the last thing you want is to be able to create too much friction with your pad and then actually cut too deep into the surface and create a far bigger problem than what you intended. But this tool was able to stall out a few times on me, which again, I know it's trying to prevent you from making errors on a car, you know, and I think there's a fine line for what the correct power rating should be versus where the dial's set at for what's comfortable. I think it's a modest or a moderate pass, that I think I'm okay with it. If you were really into detailing a car and you really need to do something aggressive, this is definitely not going to be the polisher for you. But, you know, also to complement that, there is the variable speed trigger, which I found myself using a couple of times of trying to lightly touch up an area versus wanting to go full throttle and putting it in. And I also found it relatively easy, at least with a 2 amp hour battery, to operate one-handed in a few spots. You know, trying to get into weird, awkward situations with one hand. But at least a 2 amp hour battery, that's certainly plausible. I had briefly tried this off camera with the 6 amp hour battery. That just makes this an atrocious tool to use to try to have any balance with two hands. So I don't know, I mean, maybe in the right situation that makes sense, but I think that, you know, a 2 amp hour or 4 amp hour battery is about the right choice for you. If you got one of the older 1.5 amp hour batteries, that would work too and be fine. So is this a worthwhile tool to add to your collection? I'll go with what is maybe. It depends on what purpose you're buying it for. If you're trying to polish your car, yeah, I think you'll do just fine with it. I think you can use it for a variety of other household purposes, as I've shown at least one here today. And it's a good tool to add to your collection. You know, I guess you could also polish a boat or anything else with it. So it certainly adds some extra versatility to the lineup. I like that Kobalt is going outside the regular power tool arena and getting a little bit into some specialty tools with where they're going with the line. And I think overall it works great. I like this bail handle here. You know, part of me also thinks that maybe that'd be interesting to have on an angle grinder too, as an option. Just thinking a little bit here, you know, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but I kind of like it. I'm not itching to be able to put on the screw-in angle grinder type side handle. I'll throw that aside in the bottom of my toolbox just to hang on to it. But I think for me, I kind of like this. Is it perfect? No, but is there really a perfect tool? Not really. Every tool's got compromises, and so that's where we're at on this. If you've got any other experience or thoughts on this, put it down below. Thanks for watching. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and have a great day. Bye.